Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special meeting. We'll start with roll call, please.
Benson.
Benson here.
Benson is present. Sarda.
Sarda here.
Sarda is present. Fertig.
Fertig here.
Fertig is present. And we got a bird somewhere. Hoffner.
Hoffner here.
Hoffner is here. Miner.
Miner's here.
Miner is here. Moser.
Moser here.
Moser is here. Schramm.
Schramm here.
Schramm is here. Weber.
Weber's here.
Weber's here. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson is present.
Johnson is present. City Manager Leon.
Here.
City Manager Leon is present. City Attorney Denherter.
Denherter here.
All right, now's the time for public appearances. So if there's anyone in YouTube land or who's going to call, is Dave manning the phone tonight or? Okay. Who has something that they would like to address the commission about that is not on the work session agenda, now would be the time to do it. Is Brad or Dave on YouTube this evening?
This is Dave. I'm covering both YouTube live chat and also the live phones, and we have no comments or requests for public appearances yet.
Okay, and is Colleen watching the email? Colleen
is watching the email, and I have no emails at this time.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to the meat of the agenda then. We've got quite a variety of things related to COVID-19 that staff would like to discuss with us. And then if we have time, there are also some budget questions for the commission to discuss. So I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, so we have quite an array of things, but to start out, I want to visit a little bit about just our local COVID-19 numbers and what that looks like for us. So Dwayne has been tracking those and doing some math to give us a local trend. We see on the Department of Health the statewide trend, but he's been doing that locally for us. So he has some slides to share with us. He just needs a minute to man his technology here and put those up for us, and then he'll walk us through those slides. anybody have any questions just about the raw numbers or about anything that we're seeing in our numbers? We may or may not be able to answer that for you, but or comments you want to make?
Hi guys, this is Commissioner Minor. I'm curious, I know that the state was going to start doing testing in our nursing homes, and it looked like the number of our tests went up significantly at the end of last week. We've been doing, 15 to 20 a day. And then it looked like we had 170 tests maybe performed on Friday. Does that mean that we're getting into the nursing homes? And do we have any idea how that's going?
I can address that. In my day job, I come into contact with that information. So yeah, last week at the Majestic Bluffs campus, there were over 500 tests conducted of both employees and residents. And as of today, there are only 9 pending tests left for employees. And everyone came back negative. All the residents were negative, all the employees negative. So we were pretty pleased with that. We expected at least some employees to come back positive. So unless there's some in that last batch of 9, we're in good shape.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I guess I'll just add, Dwayne, that I think it's really helpful that you are compiling that data, and that could assist us down the road if we see continued spike in cases. I think the trend line is where many of us expected to see things go as we approached June. So we'll just have to keep an eye on things.
Hoffner here. Hey, welcome everyone. Hey, I trying to get, the numbers again. Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. But it appears is the small spikes we've had, does that have to do with tourism? Or I know there's a lot of guessing going on and it's hard to calculate, but it doesn't seem like it jumped dramatically at all because of our actions, because we knew the community was coming out and the bigger box stores, obviously, before we did anything or loosened up anything. But I'm wondering if, what can we attribute that? Weather or possibly tourism or what? I know I'm just trying to get a handle on it. Anybody can tell me that?
Well, I guess you could make some speculation. Boy, I don't know. Or is it because we're, doing more testing now and we're just going to by default have more positives the more we test? I really don't know. Also the fact that some folks are asymptomatic, you wonder that maybe they have had it and just now gotten in contact with the test. It's pretty hard to say. I think folks traveling here, that could be the case. However, I'm sure our folks traveling other places could lend to some of that too. So I think it would be probably speculative to say if there was anything we could attribute to it.
Might be worth adding for anyone who's watching from the public that the State Department of Health does contact tracing for these cases, but that information is not shared with the city. So we don't know where they're tracking these cases to unless they decide to make a public announcement about it, which they do in some cases. And I'm not quite sure what their criteria is for that, but that limits our ability to know where cases may be originating from in the community.
I wanted to visit with you guys as well about our election protocol at our city facilities. So both you and the public are aware. They have had an overwhelming amount of absentee vote requests. So as we worried about a small election, I think that's not what we have to worry about anymore. If people are sending those in, I think we might even have a record election number. So that's awesome. That's great. Of course, we're dealing with 2 elections, really, you know, the city commission election and then also the primary for the county. But it's awesome that there's so much interest and so many people have participated. We are still having voting centers. Of course, we have Fire Station 2 here at the city, and then we also have City Hall. And we have hired J&H Cleaning to come in and clean prior to the election. They have a sanitation process that they've been utilizing in other facilities that we work with them on. It's like a misting technology where they mist everything. So Greg Homestead and Dave Mingo have worked with them on coming in and having that done in the 2 centers prior to and then following the election. So, you know, it should be as clean as it has ever been in both of those facilities. We will have hand washing stations, meaning the restrooms on the main floors will be available for folks to come if they want to wash in. There'll also be hand sanitizers, and our election workers will be wearing masks and be wearing gloves as well. I have been asked by people if they have to wear a mask to vote. We are not making that a requirement, a face covering to vote. We're not making that a requirement. If people want to do that, if that adds their comfort level, great. They can certainly come and do that. The election workers should be able to still, you know, verify ID and everything like that. So they certainly can do that, but we're not requiring that. We are also trying to take a step to protect both the folks that come in and vote from contact with additional people and our employees. So for example, in City Hall, we've asked the city employees, you know, let's not use that north door. Let's reserve that for voters to come in. So let's let folks be in that area and utilize those restrooms. And then for people that are city employees that are not stationed in City Hall, we've asked them, hey, for that election day, if you can stay away unless you have an urgent need to be in the building, don't access the building, stay away. And same with Fire Station 2, although that typically is less accessed because there's just fewer people that work in that building than in the City Hall building. So Al, I don't know if you have something to add on, but I think we're as prepared as can be. Maybe you want to, Al, talk about the physical setup of the voting centers?
Yeah, as Amy mentioned, we're going to be using the the City Hall, of course. We're going to close the north middle doors. So the 2 middle doors are kind of like spacing between the indoor and an outdoor. You know, there's 4 doors up there. So the far right one will be the in, the far left one, as you're facing the doors, will be the out. We've got tables set up in the gym that will space around where the booths themselves, if you remember what those are like, there's basically groups of 6 around tables, and then we put them together so that it's about 12 altogether. What we've done now is we've separated them, put an X in the middle one, so that technically it's about 6 feet in between each voting booth. We think that while the turnout is really going to be good, it's going to be mostly absentee. It'll be interesting to see what we actually have on election day. Just this afternoon, Lisa and I stopped over the county to go through the vote tabulation testing. Again, if you recall, the county has a new machine that tabulates votes. Really a slick machine. Little bit slower than the violent one that was in the past, but a lot smoother running, able to detect upside down, right side up, backwards. It's just really a slick little machine. And by the way, when we went over there, we were at over 1,800 absentee ballots for city people. And they were just under 3,000 at the time we went over there for total ballots. And both of those are more than we'd normally see throughout the election, all things added together. So it'll be interesting to see what we have for turnout the day of. I got to believe it's going to be kind of sparse because everybody's taking advantage of this opportunity to mail in ballots. I'm not sure if I have anything else. Lisa, I notice is on. Am I forgetting anything, Lisa, that you want to add?
Nothing that I think you got it out.
So I think we're as ready as we can be for the elections. Just want to see if there's any questions from the commission or Mayor, if there's questions regarding the election from the public.
I know one question I've gotten in the last day, is there still time to request your absentee ballot and get it in by June 2nd?
Yes, you would have time yet, as long as you're quick with the mail. I mean, you know, you can absentee ballot up till 5 o'clock on Monday. So yeah, you can. Just today, we get an email notification from the county telling us there's been an absentee request. Those are, I think, ours only, and I probably had 100 on my emails today again. Again, we don't really handle anything there. It's up to the county, but the county notifies us in case we have another municipal election later in the year, then we have to be in charge, if it's our election, of getting these absentees out.
I will let anyone chime in that might have comment from the public. If Dave or Colleen, you guys have anything on the election?
There are no telephone comments and no YouTube chat comments, other than a couple questions about not being able to hear Dwayne when he was speaking. So the YouTube live audio for the part that he was speaking didn't work.
Okay.
I have no emails on the election.
So today we opened up the Summit Activity Center. What I would call a soft opening. Todd, would you like to give that update? Otherwise, I can do that if you. I've been getting some emails from Brittany. So would you like to kind of review that?
Sure. This morning we had 13 people check in at the 5 a.m. hour when we opened. After that, it was pretty slowed down, with 3 checking in the 6 o'clock hour, 1 in the 7 o'clock hour, 2 in the 8 o'clock hour, 1 in the 9 o'clock hour, 6 in the 10 o'clock hour, 2 in the 11 a.m. hour. We did have 10 check in 3 p.m., but they were doing some membership adjusting in the computer, and so as people came in at 2 and at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, they wrote down the numbers and didn't put them in the computer till 3 o'clock. So there was a couple at 1, a couple at 2, 3 at 4 o'clock, and that was the last update we had. So pretty slow, other than that 5 o'clock hour, and then no major comments or complaints about how things are going. The carpet looks good in the lobby, and hallways and the upstairs have been painted, so a little bit fresher. And that was part of the reason why we didn't open until now.
So again, with our facilities plan, you know, not only are we going to be tracking the numbers and we'll phase the level of opening of each facility will depend upon a combination of where our numbers are, but then also staff availability, wellness, what personal protective equipment is available to us, all those things. So that's where we're headed with that. I think as of right now, the library is still working with the drop-off system, and they're looking at making some adjustments to their facility before they open in a limited fashion, similar to the ways that the Summit Activity Center is proceeding. I don't got a little feedback there. So unless there's any questions about that, I'd like to have Ross talk a little bit about the ordinance that's on for first reading this evening. So Ross, if you want to just talk a little bit about the history briefly, and then anything that's changed in this draft and why we're bringing this forward tonight, because I have gotten questions from the public of, oh my goodness, is this another shutdown of businesses type question?
Right. Okay. So by way of background, this commission passed ordinance 1033, which was temporary in nature. That ordinance shut down 4 different classifications or groupings of businesses for a period of time. And that period of time was limited. You guys, for lack of a better term, shut it off or ended it effectively May 1st. But within the powers that ordinance granted, you had the power to continue whatever regulation you felt appropriate within that framework until as late as June 8th. We refer to that as the sunset date of that ordinance. So if we were in a spike situation and this commission wanted to exercise the powers contained in that ordinance to close different types of businesses or to extend the 10-person gathering rules, you would be limited up to and through June 8th as the final date that restriction could be in place. So given that since the end of March, when that ordinance was first presented to you, all that has transpired since that date, looks like Yankton is going to see its peak sometime this summer. In speaking with, I think, just about every one of you, there was a general consensus that having the power to take action is still something that you feel is important to you, even if it's not, at least currently under the conditions we're experiencing, appropriate to exercise that power. And by that, I mean having the tool in the toolbox that by resolution you could very quickly impose appropriate regulations if the need arose. So that's what has been prepared for you. It is an ordinance that looks very similar to what was prepared before. It's similar to Ordinance 1033. However, it does not impose any immediate restrictions or closures. It simply gives this commission the power to do so by resolution with a sunset date that's much further into the future. So if we saw a spike sometime this summer and it appeared as though if we didn't take action, it was going to be very bad for our healthcare system, and that we were looking at potentially being overwhelmed in our healthcare system's ability to respond properly, you guys would have the power to act very quickly to take whatever appropriate action you needed. The actions that are set out in Ordinance 1034 that is up for first reading tonight include the ability to close businesses within the same 4 classifications that were contained in Ordinance 1033. However, this commission also has the power within this ordinance to expand or contract those individual businesses within each of those categories. In addition to this ordinance is the ability, short of actually closing a business, to impose operational restrictions. Again, there is no active restriction that is set forth in the ordinance, just the power to impose restrictions if that were appropriate, like occupational limitations. So you could require that businesses not have more than 50% capacity, for instance. You have a little more flexibility in the way that you can regulate without actually closing businesses down if you felt that was an appropriate tool to utilize. Again, I brought back the the 10-person limitation rule and where and how that applies if this commission wants to impose that by resolution later. Again, that also does not automatically restrict if you pass the ordinance. It just gives this commission the power by resolution to reimpose a 10-person limitation. So that's the theme of this ordinance. I think you guys are all familiar with the way Ordinance 1033 was structured, so I don't think I need to go into a lot more detail unless you ask. But it provides a framework to reimpose some of those restrictions, as well as a little more creative solutions that weren't previously available if you felt that was necessary. So the idea would be tonight you would just do a first reading on that, and you could wait if you wish, rather than proceed to schedule a second reading at our next commission meeting. You could just hold off. And if a need arose, you guys could schedule a special meeting on 24 hours notice. We could coordinate with the press and decoding. We could have the second reading at a time that was appropriate, immediately publish in the press and decoding the following day, and that ordinance would be effective. Now, that being the case, the way the ordinance reads is, since it doesn't impose an immediate restriction, if you guys would want to go that route, you would then have to call another special meeting, which in theory could be the night of publication, and you could pass your resolution imposing whatever appropriate restrictions you wish and think are appropriate within the framework that's provided for you, because you can't pass a resolution until the ordinance is effective, if that makes sense. So it would require essentially a 3-day turnaround act. You would need to publish notice of the special meeting. You need to have the special meeting to approve it. Then it would need to be published the next day, and that evening you could do another special meeting to pass your resolution taking action. So it's a 3-day turnaround, but that's quite a bit faster than the ordinary course of having to do a first and second reading on a fresh ordinance from scratch.
And the reason why we like that time frame is then it gives the public 2 opportunities to participate, the second reading, but then also the resolution, the meeting where you would have the resolution. So we, as a staff, are not recommending that you establish a public hearing this evening. Rather, you introduce this ordinance and then, take a recommendation from the health board, or you all could instigate it as well, of moving forward with a second reading and subsequent resolutions should you so choose. At this point, that's part of the reason too why we're tracking the numbers the way we are, and why we're, it's not just for our public facilities, but also so the health board has some local data to go off of, because I don't think our advice from the medical field in general is going to change, but we may look into some other strategies, like we might be looking to Avera to talk about hospital capacity, et cetera, that type of thing. But that's really where we are tonight, and you guys can discuss an introduction, but typically we don't do that. So I wanted to give some time here to discuss the ordinance itself and see if you had any questions or comments or wanted to talk about our process.
Ross, this is Nathan. Does this automatically sunsets in 6 months, right?
Yes, there is a sunset provision in this ordinance as well, but because of the anticipation that the COVID season could be slow and lengthy, it seemed appropriate to use a sunset date that was cast quite a ways out there into the future. And that seemed to make more sense given the fact that we're not actually imposing any restrictions at this time. Passage of the ordinance doesn't do that.
Commissioner Minor here. I just want to make sure that the public understands this is not, we're not moving in this direction because we're planning to close down anything right now. We're trying to make sure that we're able to be, I've heard Commissioner Mosier use the word nimble, that we can act quickly if the situation arose. So this this is just a tool in the tool belt that allows us to move quickly. It doesn't have anything to do with where the numbers are or anything right now.
Amy, this is Commissioner Benson. You said that you had gotten some feedback and some questions had been answered on this ordinance or the first reading tonight. How is the public taking it? And after giving an explanation of what this is, how do they seem to be reacting?
So I think the questions that I've gotten have been primarily just an understanding of our process, because they see the first reading and they don't maybe understand, because they're not as familiar with city business, that, oh, just because they're having a first reading doesn't mean they're closing down businesses. So just kind of clarifying that. I think I've got 3 calls of that nature of, is the city closing down businesses again? Well, no, this is the thought process. And once the thought process was given, everybody that I talked to, those 3 individuals, are like, okay, I understand. And they understood why that needed to happen. We did get an email that Colleen forwarded you today from a Mr. Scott Hansen, who asked, he says, we hear you're doing the first reading of an ordinance to again shut down restaurant, dining rooms, hair salons, etc. Do we have any specific medical evidence that these are places where the virus is spreading? Or is it just assumptions? It's not reasonable to arbitrarily shut down people's incomes and perhaps destroy businesses forever based on assumptions. These places have proven to have been responsible, follow social distancing, doing extra sanitizing, and limiting the numbers of patrons they were allowed to reopen. Every bit as much as the bigger box stores are allowed to stay open. No one will be forced to go to any of these businesses. Who are more vulnerable or concerned about getting the virus will still have the option of staying home. Let the people make their own health and social decisions. Thank you. So we did get that email, and I don't know what comment is coming up right now, but other than that, that was pretty much what we've heard. And I did try on the radio and in the media review to make sure folks understood that this wasn't a path we were headed down. This is a stopgap if the commission or health board feels they need to recommend it to the commission to have in place.
I think it's important to recognize too that as scientists, the CDC, for example, learn more about the virus, we might come up with alternative measures that we can take too. So as we know more, we can be smarter about the actions that we're taking. We had universal shutdowns early on, and we'll see how that evolves. But we think this is what we need to have in the pipeline just in case. At least I feel that way.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Mosier. I took a text from somebody that said they heard we were closing down again, and it took me a minute because I know what we're trying to do here I'm like, where did that come from? Not thinking about the resolution that we're reading tonight. So I know we always have great media partners listening in on our meeting and a part of the meeting. And I think a lot of it that's going to be important here is, as everybody's already stated, is the education of what this step in the process means, and to really articulate that and educate people how that all fits together, because I think that's the key component here.
So Commissioner Schramm, Ross, you had stated that we could, in the future, add or remove businesses from those categories if we should pass something or do a second reading and pass this type of ordinance. Is it possible to add all businesses to that list, or are non-exempt, protected businesses still going to be exempt from the list, even though, in my mind, if we are having to shut down businesses because it's an outbreak, in theory, in my mind, you'd have to shut down everything because it's that bad that you are not just targeting certain business types, but all business should be shut down. So is that something we could do or not? I mean, it'd have to get really serious in my mind for us to shut down.
You would have the authority to completely shut down any type of business if you wish by modifying those lists. There is a list that specifically is exempt. But I believe even that list can be modified, so you can add or change or remove those that are in and those that are expressly out. That's
Okay.
within the control of this commission under the current language as drafted.
Thank you.
Is there any more commission discussion on this topic? For those that are maybe listening in, this will be on our agenda at 7 p.m. So we'll get public feedback at that time. But during the study session, we're gonna leave it to commission discussion. And if there's no more commission discussion, let's go on to the event planning that's going on. Amy?
I wanted to talk a little bit with the commission about events, and Todd is on the call too if you guys have more specific questions. But we have decided that we're going to go ahead with Music at the Meridian, but postpone the schedule a bit. So our first tentative plan for our first Music at the Meridian would be the 23rd of July. That's a Thursday. And that's in keeping with the tentative plan for the Rock and Rumble weekend. So Mr. Dayoff plans to do the Rock and Rumble event on July 25th. So that will be the Thursday before. So again, just like everything, we'll watch the numbers and see what we think is safe there to do, but that's a tentative plan. We have decided to officially postpone fireworks, and we are working on an alternative date. We don't know what that will be or if it will be in concert with something else later in the summer. However, we think that given the information that we've heard from our medical officials and our peak infection time, we think that that's probably a smart thing to do. So we've already purchased the fireworks. We will have fireworks. They just will not be on that 4th of July. And Todd and I talked a lot about this. I think, and Todd, if you want to chime in, please do. But I think part of the decision was, let's make a decision so that people can plan, make their summer plans as well, and not just leave it hanging out there for a long time. So to make a call on it so people can start formulating their plans. Happy to discuss that more as well. We had a nice visit today with John Kraft and Randy Oliver from Riverboat Days Committee. And the Riverboat Days Committee is still discussing what they should do. We talked with them and we told them, you know, like we're telling everybody that we will not tell them they cannot have their event. You know, we'll support them if they decide to move forward, or if they decide to move forward in a different way, or if they decide not to hold the event. We want to be there as a partner for them. So they're still talking and just making their decisions. We're not pushing them in any direction other than giving them things to think about that we have heard from other event organizers and sharing information. So lots to go into that decision making, but that's an event too that happens later in the summer. And by that time, maybe something that they want to move ahead with. So they're looking statewide, really, I think, to find out to what other large events across the state are doing. And they know too, they're being watched by other communities as to what Riverboat Days is doing. So they know that their decisions will probably help other people make decisions. So they're taking it with a great amount of seriousness, and they're going to keep us in contact and keep communicating with us so we can share information as we know it. Questions
Amy,
about?
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted too soon, I guess. Commissioner Mosier here. Did they give an idea on an exact date by which they will make a decision?
No, not exactly. I think that they are meeting tomorrow. My understanding was they were going to meet tomorrow, and John said, you know, we hope we have a decision, but we may or may not. But they did say they're getting close to a time where they have to start, you know, making commitments or making decisions. So they're not behind right now, but it's getting to that point where they have to be making decisions. So.
Yes, our Hoffner here. We're going to meet tomorrow night and have a few professionals weigh in on our meeting to give us some of their take on everything, and then we'll take what we learned tonight and other members and try to make a decision, at least find the date that we can decide. Every day goes by, obviously there's many people wondering, not only vendors but entertainers and everything else, and so much goes into it. But tomorrow night we'll meet to hopefully have well, at least an answer of what that date is we're going to call it, or call it tomorrow night. So we'll keep you informed.
Yeah, so that's where we are right now with our events and activities. Just trying to keep an eye on everything and trying to keep communicating. We've been working with Casey Haberman and the Chamber and YPG and other community partners. We've included the state parks and some other private organizers. The folks from the Hops Farms, for example, have been on our events call to try to not be, I guess, telling people what they should or should not do, since we don't have the ordinance and any ordinance in place, but to guide them and to tell them what we're hearing and provide them with some best practices. And Casey's able to give them some information that she's getting from other places in the state to help out with that. So, and then understanding once people are here, whether that's for a small event like a camping event with their family, or whether it's for a planned event that's happening in our community, we have the ability to make them feel comfortable and confident in what they're doing. So we've been trying to make it more of a forum and a discussion, really, rather than here's what you need to be doing. And I think that's the best we can do at this time. And that's been what we've been doing with our community partners as well. In terms of our businesses that are here as well that have questions or ideas, we've been trying not to give them a specific direction, but to help them with their planning.
And it's a good point. What we're going to have tomorrow night is we'll obviously have the Yankton area arts, a very important part of our partnership. At the same time, we're going to have Casey as one of our guests to enlighten us on the latest South Dakota. And I think the biggest challenge, as you all can realize, is the fact that one thing I think we learned from our last meeting 2 weeks ago, we can't meet these as it stands currently. There's no way that we could possibly meet hardly any of these CDC guidelines. Think about it. We can't do the social distancing. The sanitary would be just a challenge we couldn't even handle. So that's something to think about. And then the other factor comes in, as you've probably seen the latest on the news about Sturgis. You know, they say, okay, we're not having this rally. Well, people are coming. And we're getting calls daily on people who want to know if they could make their plans for the riverboat days coming this summer. That's one other part of this. We don't realize that people may come anyway to this city. You know, we prepared for a crowd anyway. You know, that's kind of a challenge. Sturgis thinks they're going to get a lot of people coming no matter what. Of course, they're a lot different crowd. We're a lot better crowd than them anyway. But anyway, the bottom line is, so that's a challenge. So we have a lot of things to think about. If it were July 4th, it'd be an easier call, but it's quite a ways off yet. So we'll take day by day.
Any other comments or questions about events or activities in the summer? If not, I would like to talk a little bit about COVID-19 funding. One thing I would like to do, and just either get your, consent or comments on to see if it looks like something that the commission would like me to do, is to put together a letter, probably with the mayor's signature, to our state and to our federal delegates regarding the need for funding for municipalities, not just Yankton, but municipalities in general. They've asked for feedback from communities, and in my weekend review, I asked you all to reach out as elected officials for the need for operating funds for our community to help us out as they're approving funding bills. So I would like to draft a letter. I certainly would provide you a copy, but get that off prior to our next meeting to the delegates and let them know the importance of funding for local cities. So just if that's something people would like to weigh in on, otherwise I presume that would be something you'd be supportive of. Okay, I'm hearing nothing, so I think that means go, oh, I see
Sorry,
Amy's.
Commissioner Minor here, 100%, please write the letter. If we don't speak up in a unified fashion, then we will absolutely be overlooked. So please, let's write the letter.
Commissioner Sarda, same thing, please do.
We will get something drafted and put out to our delegates. Also, if you all are interested to reach out individually to congressional staff or to our state delegates, that is also useful. I've had good conversations with the staff people from our congressional delegation. They've been very responsive, so that's very positive. They all understand where we're coming from. Senator Rounds has been a governor, so he understands how our cities are funded. And I've talked extensively with their staff, and they've asked for some information from us. So I think it's positive, but we really would like some revenue replacement. But if that can't be done, if they could help us offset some of our costs for emergency service personnel costs, that would even be helpful as well. We have expenses with PPE and those types of things, but those are pretty small monetarily combined compared to some of the things that we're going to be faced with. And certainly other states have more capabilities than we do in South Dakota at the local level to impact funding. So we really, while our sales tax remains strong and healthy right now, we anticipate that that may not continue throughout the summer. So we really would like to put an umbrella and not a thimble out if there's funding available. If there's other comments and no other comments on that, I did send you some general questions, and we may only have time to talk about one of them, but we're starting to work on a budget recommendation for you all on the 15th and 16th. If you set those as your first budget meetings tonight, we're going to talk about the 5-year capital improvement plan, and we're going to talk about the outside agencies. One of the things that I would like to visit with you about is just to get feedback on this year, 2020. So far, I have not made any recommendations to you to cut anything in 2020 in outside agencies or in the BBB with the outside agencies that we fund. And I think that I've talked with some of you about that individually, but I just wanted to hear if there's thoughts or comments that we should be doing that. I want to hear those. I think financially speaking, we will be okay, even if the BBB tax continues to underperform due to what's going on. But you will spend down that balance that you have in that fund. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. And if someone has an issue or would like to talk about that further, that might be something we need to discuss in June about the second half of the year. But to me, a lot of our outside agencies and things that are funded in the BBB as outside assistance, we've made those commitments, and I think that we should follow through on those if we can. We have cut back on some of the things that we fund for the city out of BBB, i.e. facade program, we haven't moved forward with this year, et cetera, to make that a little bit softer of a impact on the balance. But I feel strongly that we've made the commitments, and if we can't afford to follow through with those commitments this year, we need to do that. I'm going to go with the silence is yes. How do you feel?
Commissioner Sarda, I agree with that, Amy. If we can make some cuts internally off of that, I would like us to keep the commitments we have made for this year.
Okay. I will keep doing some information mining of you all individually in emails, et cetera. And if anybody wants to respond independently to me on those questions that I asked, I'm happy to take that feedback. I do see, Mayor, that it's 5 to 7. So let you wrap up whatever it is you'd like to say, and then
I think we've still got a few minutes. It's only 6:52, so let's do the second question quick
okay,
as well.
I'll keep going then. And I'll adjust my clock here on my screen. My second question is that in 2021, I continue to, what my tentative plan right now is to cut down significantly on the areas of the BBB budget that are projects and programs that are run by the city. And the reason for that is to lessen what we may need to cut on the outside agencies that we fund with the BBB. So things like fireworks, facade program, repayment of HSC property, some of the special events expenditures would be cut out for 2021. Now, that isn't saying that if we get surprised, we couldn't decide to move ahead with one of those things or many of those things or all of those things. But I'm thinking that we're going to probably have a little slower year next year as well. Kind of a maybe just a slower economy based on what happens this year. And while I think we're going to come back strong, I want to plan conservatively. So my intention is not to fund those things so that we can lessen the cuts that we might need to make to the other agencies that are supported by the BBB. That's your guys' call, however. If you want to direct me in another direction, I'd just like to bring you a proposal that most accurately reflects your philosophy.
Commissioner Schramm, Amy, I do agree that we should probably do what you're proposing. The fireworks, I've heard a lot of people say that they would really miss, but other communities, I've done some research on this, they raise the money privately to have the fireworks in conjunction with the city allowing the use of them on the property like we've done in the past. So I don't know, there may be some creative ways that the fireworks could still happen, just it coming out of city budget is probably not a feasible option at this time. I agree with you on that.
Well, if we get further down the line and we end up being more pleasantly surprised than we think we could be on returns, that's something we could put in early on in the year. Parks and Rec purchases the fireworks early, which is why we already have them. So we get a better price and we get more fireworks, but that's something we could always put back in as well.
All right, is there any more discussion on this topic? Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to adjourn so we have a few minutes before our regular meeting.
And we'll have more opportunities to talk about this too, so.
And
I'll make a motion, Mosier.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Al, could you do roll call, please?
Benson,
Aye.
Sarda,
Sarda, aye.
Sarda's aye. I'm sorry, I didn't repeat. Benson was aye. Sarda's aye. Fertig.
Fertig, aye.
Fertig is aye. Hoffner.
Hoffner, aye.
Hoffner is aye. Minor.
Minor, aye.
Minor is aye. Mosier.
Mosier, aye.
Mosier is aye. Schramm.
Schramm, aye.
Schramm is aye. Weber.
Weber's aye.
Weber is aye. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson is aye.
Mayor Johnson is aye. Motion passes 9-0.
All right, we will reconvene at 7 p.m. for our regular meeting.
Now, do we sign out completely again, or I can't remember, did we sign back in?